Good evening. Welcome to another Mothman-podcast. I'm Darryl Rourke, the Mothman, and in the studio with me is my co-host.
I'm Ann.
Tonight we're going to be looking into a series of things that we've talked about a lot in the past, and that's quantum theory. And supposedly a modern scientist by the name of Robert Lancy has come up with a theory that shows that the quantum theory proves that you never die. So to start off with, I'm going to let you listen to his theory.
By the U.S. scientist Robert Lanza, principally argues that rather than the universe creating life, it's actually life that creates the universe. What we in ourselves call consciousness was actually there at the beginning of everything. And it's just that now, almost 14 billion years later, consciousness channels itself through us, human beings. As such, we've come to view life, the universe, and everything through our bodies, processed by our brains. But really, to some degree, none of that is necessary. In this model, then, our brains and bodies might be viewed more like sophisticated modems, catching and translating signals and converting those into our own life experiences. But if the brain and body dies, if the modem is destroyed, then the signals don't just disappear as well. They remain and might well be rerouted or recycled into some other host. In a biocentric reality, life is the signal. And while we may think that it's so reliant on our bodies for communication, it actually carries on regardless. It's life as we don't know it, but it's life all the same. So the theory goes. Lanza's ideas have divided opinion since they were first put forward in the late 2000s. For some, biocentrism offers a bridge between the philosophical concepts of life and death and the physicality of it all. For others, the theory is still far too vague, with little to no evidence as to what consciousness really is. In subsequent discussions and interviews, Lanza has highlighted the famed double-slit experiment to back biocentrism up. Via the experiment, scientists can show that light and matter can either be wave or particle depending upon whether they are observed. Consciousness creates the universe, not the other way around. Supporters also draw on the fine-tuning problem for further reasons as to why biocentrism makes sense. The fine-tuning problem shows that there are so many physical conditions to the universe that make it just right for life, that it seems impossibly unlikely that we should be here in a universe that's so suited to us. When viewed biocentrically, though, there is no fine-tuning problem, because consciousness obviously would aim for a reality that works. According to some, all of this inevitably leads to so-called life after death, to death being an illusion, because life and consciousness no longer end with our bodies and brains. Instead, it dissipates out of us like a kind of energy into the rest of the universe, of its own making, once the vehicle of a body is no more. Again, biocentrism is sometimes criticized for the vagueness of this aspect, although it's not as though this is the first attempt to place consciousness or a soul beyond our physical means. Discussions of that sort go all the way back to René Descartes, at least, in the 17th century and the Age of Enlightenment. More broadly still, biocentrism suggests that even the underlying principle of time is merely the product of consciousness inside our current bodies, creating a means through which to understand and remember. Time, and specifically the arrow of time, is then explained as a tool of our minds, rather than some kind of higher, immovable quality of the universe. But finally, Lanza's biocentrism isn't the only such idea towards living forever either. The succinctly named quantum immortality model relies on that other underpinning central concept of modern theoretical science, the multiverse. Developed out of Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation, the idea is that for every choice or split that's ever made, a new branch of reality is formed. These branches never cross over, but run closely alongside one another, reflecting minor to major differences as a direct result of whatever caused the split in the first place. Over the years, science fiction writers have had a lot of fun with the story potential here, suggesting that huge events could well be determined upon a person's fleeting decision to buy an apple or a banana, for example. But what the multiverse could mean for life after death is something that science fact has pondered too. Quantum immortality is that in a multiverse, there should always be a split possible through which a person survives. A rerouting through reality, which means that again and again and again, they live rather than die. The idea can once more be linked back to key studies like the double slit experiment, which apparently suggests that all options are always possible until they're observed and then are not. Death is still death. It's still final, and it's not as though, even in the multiverse, you could rewind time to make it not happen. But after death, and if you follow the multiverse, it could be that on another level of the model, in another version of the endless realities, that particular death didn't happen, and life still wins out. The question to combine both biocentrism and quantum immortality is, could consciousness create not just the universe, but the multiverse as well? Can life move between multiverse strands, even if physical bodies cannot? When we're gone, will some kind of awareness, a soul by some definitions, still remain? And if that were to be the case, then could we, as we are, ever hope to know or understand what was happening? Physically speaking, death is the end of our bodies and brains. Our vehicles for life are no more, and so perhaps we could never hope to understand life in quite the same way again. Not unless our consciousness were to end up in another human being. But that's a theory for another video. What's clear is that still nothing is certain. Biocentrism has divided opinion in recent times, yes, but it cannot truly claim to have cracked the mystery of life and death just yet. The same for quantum immortality, which is much more of a thought experiment than a physical surety. Again, for modern-day humanity, it can feel as though the search for eternal life is an everlasting quest. And that's good and encouraging in some ways, but not so much in others. With or without a meaning or explanation for life, we do all at least have a life to lead, with emotions to feel, roles to fulfill, and experiences to share. There are some massive and fundamental unknowns still outstanding, but until that fog eventually lifts, we can all spend our lives looking out for each other, enjoying the good times, and savoring the things that make us happy. We might well ponder our quantum condition, but life's still what we make of it. And remember, it could yet be that our consciousness created the universe, and that's pretty special.
Well, Anne, what's your opinion?
That's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think about.
But you know, it kind of ties back into what you and I have been discussing in the past about the different dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, he's saying that maybe the life leaves the body, then it goes into the universe or at another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, all this is seemingly to me, and when I'm reading and listening and finding these things that I want to share with our listeners, it means to me that, you know, I think we're onto something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we keep going in our path that you know, and just take everybody's opinion, not just ours, but everybody's opinion, and put them together, that maybe we'll find something that we're looking for.
All right.
Now, I don't know if we'll ever answer the question while we're alive, if
Mm-hmm.
there's a life after death, but I've always said, and if you know, anybody has listened to our podcast, I've always said that I felt that our soul is our entity,
Mm-hmm.
and when our soul leaves the body, then that's just moving on now, and it really makes me happy to think that there might be another dimension, so it
Mm-hmm.
moves on into another dimension. So, and when we keep talking about children remember life after death, well, this even opened up the same theories that we've been looking at in the past, that, you know, it just found another entity
Right.
to go into because it for whatever reason wanted to come back to this time and space that we're occupying at this time in this entity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean in this universe. But it's I don't know. What do you think?
When I took my first psychology class in college, we were talking about, like, you know, after you die, what happens to your brain. And I actually brought up a very similar theory to my professor, and I thought that I was the only one that had ever thought of that. I said, you know, what if when we pass away, we only pass away in one dimension, and we're still there in another dimension, and
Right.
continually continuing to lead our lives like we never died. And it was so funny to me because my professor said, Ann, she told me some other people that had the same theory. And I said, well, that's wild, because I really thought I was the only one that thought crazy stuff like that.
See, I don't think it's crazy. I think that you're reaching out and we have the technology now and the brain processing ability to search where people back in the 40s and 50s, they would never even discuss this, much less thought about it.
Very true.
Because it was all, the technology wasn't there to research and bring out and understand things like the quantum theory. If you'd asked a farmer up in rural areas what he thought about the quantum theory, he'd look at you with his cross eyes and says, does it grow in the fields or does
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just the way it was, and it's just the way it is today. Is we keep trying to reach out and find an answer to a something like you mentioned. We've never ever found what we're looking for, so we keep searching.
Right.
And I think that's going to be us for the next, as long as this podcast stays alive. So we'll always be researching some things. A lot of people have said that they like to hear ghost stories and things like that, but and we will bring more ghost stories, and we will have a podcast where we're talking to some listeners or giving their thoughts. But I just think that to tie the ghost back into what we can perceive as reality, which is very limited, we need to find out about the dimensions and talk about, I believe in one of our episodes we talked about the fourth dimension, and that's where heaven and hell was located. And, just start looking into those areas and seeing if we can tie that back into why we walk in and there's ghosts, and how these ghosts affect us by pushing us or slapping us, or how do they come up with I guess what I'm trying to say is how they come up with a materialistic ability to create power that would feel like a slap to the face.
Right. And I think that's, they just have to be like a sponge and just absorb energy to be able to manifest any movement or feeling.
Right. And, well, I agree with that. That's a good analogy of what we're talking about.
And I think as far as what happens after death, I think in my mind, I'm to the point where it's just like I don't feel that I will ever know for sure until I actually die.
Well, I don't think any of us will until then. But I would like to think that we have the ability to analyze the data that we have been able to accumulate over these past few years, that we can use that to narrow down the tunnel. The light at the end of the tunnel. Right. We're trying to narrow that tunnel down. So, we have a lot of people out there that are very religious and go by the Bible, and that's great, because a lot of these theories tie back into religion and an all great being, okay, a God, as you would say,
right?
The great source, and that's what I'm trying to look for. I'm trying to figure out how we tie all this back together, because we're not fighting religion by no means. We're supporting it, if nothing else. But we just want to find out and narrow it down, because everything you read is something that was written by a man. And you cannot ever make me believe that you can write something without putting your own feelings into it and your own, you perceive things different than I do.
Very true.
So when he's putting it in writing, he's putting his perception of what he feels that this should say. So we're just trying to reach out and find out what the difference is between, what he perceived and reality.
Right. And the more human hands you have in something, the more likely it is to have errors and just not be correct.
Right. And you don't have cell phones going off in the background. I think that one was mine this
Yeah,
time.
that was.
So,
Yeah, I think it is so much to think about, and it's definitely worth trying to find evidence. After near-death experiences and things like that, just to kind of compare the data that we do have, and it's subjective data, but it's still data. So
right, and I agree with that 100%.
and if 100 people are saying the same thing, there's a decent chance that it's true.
I agree. Or you've been led by someone that has the ability to convey their thoughts and their beliefs onto the multiple people,
Right.
which we've seen a lot in the last few years. But it's just like evangelist who talks is perish into committing suicide. I mean, it can be done. I mean, and I'm just trying to play the word game here where, yeah, I agree with you, but yet I don't agree with you.
You're being open-minded about it. You're just willing to accept the data.
Right.
And not just close off your mind because somebody told you something.
I will listen to the data and analyze the data and realize that it is data, and we just take that data and run with it and try to verify it the best way we can.
True.
So, kind of like our news people
very
should be
true.
doing. Now, I
Very
don't say they're doing it, but they should be doing it, okay?
I've got to the point where if I don't see something with my own eyes, I don't put that much faith in it. I don't trust it. And sometimes when I do see it with my own eyes, I know that things can be edited.
Right. And there again, I told you before that I used to be a police officer, and I've had things quoted in the paper that I never even thought of, much less said.
Right.
And it was a quote. So I don't know where this stuff comes from, and I don't know how they perceive it. But it's it's their perception of the reality of where they're at that point.
Right.
So, we're just looking for everything right now. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody for listening to us tonight. I hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. And I hope you tune in. We've got some interesting things coming up. I've got a series that we're going to be producing here in this next month that talks about an invasion, and it takes place in England. So hopefully everybody will enjoy that. And so until next time, I'm Daryl, and I'm saying good night.
Good night.
And from mothman-podcast, thank you for listening.